On behalf of the Ireland fraternity, I extend a very warm welcome to each one of you to the 11th Distinguished Global Thinker Awards. This year, Ireland is celebrating 25 years of excellence in delivering management and engineering courses at undergraduate and graduate levels. Established in 1993, today, Ireland has 5 campuses located in Delhi, Greater Noida, Gurgaon, Jaipur and Lucknow, and has an alumni base of over 9,000. Our campuses are accredited by South Asian Quality Assurance System, National Board of Accreditation, and NAAC. Ireland Institute is a member of United Nations Global Compact Initiative (PRB) and is amongst only 2 Indian schools to have earned champion status. The Ireland Distinguished Global Thinker Award is presented each year to a thought leader and honors outstanding individuals and scholars who have made a significant difference to the national and global community. Since 2006, the list of recipients included Lord Dukkapare, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, Professor C.K. Prahlad, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Professor Andrew Little, Mr. Sam Petroda, Professor Saumitra Datta, Mr. Naveen Jain, and Professor Ashish Nanda. In keeping with this tradition, it's my honor and privilege to announce that in the Silver Jubilee year of Ireland, we are celebrating the achievement of Professor Jagdish Seth. Professor Seth is world's foremost leading expert on consumer psychology and marketing with over 50 years of combined experience in teaching and research at the Universities of Southern California, Illinois, Columbia, MIT, and Emory, amongst others. He has also advised several governments and world leaders, including the government of Singapore and President Bill Clinton. He is a prolific author with hundreds of articles and books to his name. His biography, The Accidental Scholar, was unveiled by Prime Minister Modi on 15 October 2014. Sir, we are honored to have you with us today. Making this day more memorable, the ceremony will be followed by Professor Seth's special lecture on how the Trump presidency will transform US trade policy implications for India. The discussions will be moderated by Mr. Arun Kumar Singh, former Indian Ambassador to the United States of America and a diplomat with a career spanning over 4 decades in the Indian Foreign Services. Sir, it's my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to you, sir. May I now request Dr. Daisy Mathur Jain to read out a citation honoring Professor Jagdish Seth. Thank you.
Professor Jagdish Seth represents the pinnacle of academic achievement in the field of management, thought, and action. He is the current Charles H. Kelstad Professor of Marketing at Emory University and the former Walter H. Stelnar Distinguished Professor of Marketing at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. His pioneering research and efforts towards consolidating the disciplines of marketing, business law, organizational management, and several others have influenced several generations of management students and some of the largest corporations in the world. Born in Rangoon in Burma in 1938, Dr. Seth was the youngest of 6 siblings and had a simple childhood under the watchful eye of his father, a staunch Gandhian. In 1941, fearing an imminent Japanese invasion, his family was forced to return to their native village in Gujarat, having left most of their worldly possessions behind. In this period of turmoil, he continued to persevere with his education and went on to receive a degree in BCom Honours from Loyola College, Madras. In 1961, he joined the MBA program at the University of Pittsburgh, then went on to study and research at MIT, and subsequently returned to Pittsburgh to get his PhD in 1966. It was during this period that he started developing his Theory of Buying Behavior, a book that he co-authored with his mentor, Professor John Howard, a book which would provide the foundation for the future of research in the field of consumer psychology. Professor Seth has over 50 years of combined experience in teaching and research at the universities of Southern California, Illinois, Columbia, MIT, and Emory, amongst others. He is a prolific author with hundreds of articles and books to his name. He served as a member of the board of several public companies including Norstan, Cryocell International, and Wipro Limited. He has been an advisor and mentor to many CEOs and large corporations. He consistently figures in the list of Economic Times top 10 global thought leaders. Professor Seth's accolades include Outstanding Marketing Educator, an award presented by the Academy of Marketing Science, and the Outstanding Educator Award, twice presented by Sales and Marketing Executives International. He is also the recipient of all 4 top awards given by the American Marketing Association: the Richard D. Irwin Distinguished Marketing Education Award, the Charles Coolidge Pardon Award, the P.D. Converse Award for Outstanding Contributions to Theory in Marketing, and the William Wilkie Award for Marketing for a Better Society. Professor Seth is a Distinguished Fellow of the Academy of Marketing Science, Fellow of the American Psychological Association, and a recipient of a Distinguished Fellow Award from the International Engineering Consortium. He is also founder and chairman of Academy of Indian Marketing. A great man is also known by the cause he espouses. Professor Seth is a philanthropist who has contributed large sums to academia through Seth Foundation and also supports AMA Seth Foundation Doctoral Consortium through his foundation. IIM Institute for Higher Education is honored to confer the 11th IIM Distinguished Global Thinker Award on Professor Jagdish Seth. May I request our chairperson, Mrs. Malvika Rai, to confer the 11th IIM Global Thinker Award on Professor Jagdish Seth.
May I now request Ambassador Arun Singh to deliver his address.
Thank you. It's really a privilege for me to join Professor Seth on this occasion when he's being conferred with the Global Thinker Award by IIM. I recall way back in 2010 when I made my first visit to Emory University in Atlanta and interacted with people there. Everybody told me that the one person I must meet was Professor Seth. And when I reached there, met people, I could see the impact that he had on students there, on faculty, in terms of the impact his vision and thinking and teaching related to management and marketing had in the framework of the university. And beyond that, I found that whenever Indian students joined at Emory, he was their mentor. He was seen as the person who welcomed them along with their families and parents who came initially, and seeing him there, seeing that interaction, gave a lot of comfort to the parents when they are leaving their children thousands of kilometers away to study in a different context. So I really want to thank him for that effort, and I could see the huge impact it had. I've also been thrilled that he chose for the topic of his comments today the subject of impact of President Trump on you and his economic policies on the US-India economic relationship. Many of you would have noticed that since the election of the new president in the US relations with large number of countries, including US allies, has been disrupted. But the relationship with India has progressed in a positive manner. I recall it was way back in November 2016. The US president had been elected on 8th November. And on 10th November, I wrote an article, an op-ed in one of the newspapers. And I said, India-US relations at 4.0, it will continue to see consolidation. And I said that because Hillary Clinton used to often say that during her tenure as Secretary of State, the relations were at 3.2. Because each successive US president, since President Clinton, then President Bush, then President Obama, had advanced the relationship forward in a step-by-step manner. And in Indian case, each successive Prime Minister, Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, Prime Minister Vajpayee, then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. Since there was now a broad bipartisan support, both in the US and in India, to take this relationship forward, one could expect that it would advance in a positive framework. And that is exactly what we have seen happening over the past year. But a particular attention is now being focused also in the economic dimension. Again, I recall that in March 2017, writing another op-ed, I had said that India and the US, in their relationship, especially in India, we need to focus on the economic dimension. And the reason for it is that the political dimension has progressed very well. Strategic cooperation is progressing well. Defense cooperation between the two countries is progressing well. But we continue to have difficulties in the economic aspect of the relationship. Our total trade is about $115 billion. And unlike India's trade with most other countries, with the US, we have a surplus. And we have a surplus of almost $30 billion. And while we feel that this is a very small surplus, given the fact that China has a surplus of $360 billion with the US, the new US president and the new administration has said that with this surplus, you are in the top 10 countries with which US has a deficit, and you need to address it. Then at the WTO, there are major differences between India and the US in terms of approach to various issues. Our position has been that the globalization that took place, led by the US, especially since 1990, including in the framework of WTO, has not fully worked in India's interest. Manufacturing, many have argued, has been sucked away from India, whereas countries like China have benefited from that and drawn in manufacturing. So do we need a new framework for globalization, new norms for international interaction on economic issues? And what President Trump has done in terms of walking away from the TPP, challenging the norms of NAFTA, challenging US free trade agreements with other countries. And India has also now walked back from several free trade agreements that we had entered into with other countries, arguing that it did not work for us. Is there now new opportunity with the Trumpian disruption in the international political and economic order? Is there new opportunity for India to enter not in a fully globalized, but selective, strategic economic engagement with some countries to build our capacities? Because the US leaders have said that the rise of India is in US interest, but the rise of India must have the economic rise of India. So it is in that framework that I invite Professor Sheth to share his thoughts with us and give us a way forward. Thank you.
Ambassador Arun Singh, Mr. and Mrs. Rai, and other invited guests, it is my really humble acceptance of the award. I think it means a lot to me. I do want to mention a couple of things before I get going into the topic. I went to the United States in 1961 as a foreign MBA student. Quickly got out, got my doctorate without a thesis. 1963 I went to Columbia University as a research scholar with my professor. And I started teaching, and my colleagues were all Americans. I was the only Indian, and they did not know how to pronounce our names, Jagdish, Yagdish, etc. So one of them said, look, we'll call you Jag, like in Jaguar. And ever since that association, I've been dreaming of owning a Jaguar with a license plate Jag. Right? And the dream became a reality 19 years ago when I turned 60. I'm 79. Do I look 79? No. That's because in marketing, the first thing we learn and practice, it's all about packaging. True story, I have two grown-up children, both married, both are in Atlanta where I live. I don't count my birthdays. In my generation, birthdays was one more day. So Saturday morning, I remember I went out to the house to pick up my newspaper and saw this beautiful Jaguar, XJ model, top of the line apparently. Even the color I liked, parked in the driveway with a handwritten license plate, Jag, happy 60th birthday. It was a rental car. So I'm still looking for my Jaguar. Now this is an interesting anecdote because it ties to such a strong change in the world globally. Jaguar is the state British Empire symbol of excellence. All officials have to have Jaguars, ambassadors, diplomatic people, or when the Prime Minister visits, that's the car. Today that brand is owned by an Indian ex-colony enterprise owning the brand Tata Motors. 20 years ago, nobody would have imagined that what was possible. The world has changed that much. And the Trump administration that has come in is going to bring about more changes, some undoing, some doing something new, and we will analyze it and then talk about its impact on India-US relationship. The first major thing is to analyze why Trump got elected. It is very similar to the rise of Ronald Reagan, which I will give you the parallels. Ronald Reagan's rose because we had a huge impact on the white working class unionized labor. The first energy crisis of 1974-78 brought about a huge structure in the economy. President Carter, who got elected, could not do anything with the economy. Unions were decimated. Automation came in the automobile industry, robots took over the job. Outsourcing became the buzzword in the 80s, for example. Downsizing, right-sizing, re-engineering the corporation were used with things we used in management literature. And there was a resentment. It was the reaction by that white population in factory towns who really made Ronald Reagan rise through the political process. Same thing happened with Trump. The economic recession of 2007 and 8 let go all the employees in many ways in those Rust Belt, as we call it, in the center. They were all white unionized labor. Unions had lost their power, which is where the Democrats were primarily aligning with the labor side, and they had basically a revolt. And they found somebody they could latch on to outside the mainstream political process. Ronald Reagan came as an outsider. He positioned himself as an outsider. Washington is very much the same people controlling it. I would like to bring about a change, and he struck a chord, as did with Trump. Same agenda. If you look at Trump's agenda today, there's a parallel First of all, Ronald Reagan immediately said that the corporate tax paid by American corporations at 55% is too high. It's unfair competition worldwide. It should be down to 35%. And he got it done. Similarly, Trump said corporate tax is too high, 35%, should be down to 20%. He got it done at 21%. Ronald Reagan's speeches at that time and writings were very inflammatory, anti-Mexican. Actually, he did not like Chavez, who was an organized union activist. He really thought that was unfair to the American economy, and he took that as a personal challenge. He became anti-union. It's absolutely ironic that Ronald Reagan was a Democrat, a union leader himself, was elected from the most liberal democratic state called California. Trump is from the second most liberal democratic state, is New York. It's fascinating to see the parallel. Trump has done the same thing, anti-Mexican rhetoric, including building the wall and all that stuff. Fascinating. Ronald Reagan immediately said, we have an unfair global competition from Japan. Threatened the Japanese government and the enterprises that unless you invest in America, make it in America. So all the automobile people came, and he even publicly said that I can raise the price of yen to 90 yen to make your export totally unprofitable. So Toyota came, Honda came, Nissan came, and they all put new plant capacity in America. In fact, lots of Japanese corporations bought out all of the things we had, like television manufacturers, watchmakers. They invested in real estate like Hawaii, Rockefeller Center. This time it is not Japan but China. The rhetoric will not be as inflammatory because Chinese are so strong as an economy, and many of the Trump administration cabinet ministers are all pro-China. Keep that in the back of your mind. So there's a counterbalancing force. He will do it more guarded, but you will see once in a while telling the Chinese that you are not doing fair pricing, there's a dumping, etc., about the steel or aluminum or whatever it is, and we should impose tariffs and all that stuff. It's typical, very interesting process. Ronald Reagan was definitely fed up as a governor of California. Too much federal government regulation, too much bureaucracy. The EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, has become very strong, not allowing to do anything. So Reagan wanted to actually reduce the bureaucracy in Washington. Same agenda you will hear here. Ronald Reagan coined that as new federalism. The role of the central government is only defense and nothing else. Everything else will be delegated to the states, whether it's the healthcare, whether it's the education, or anything else. We will hear about the same thing. Deregulate, or relax the regulatory agencies as watchdogs to say, allow whatever is possible. Pro-business in that regard primarily, which is again interesting. Reagan did a couple of things, which is what they will follow. It looks like the same Reagan playbook as we call it in American football. Reagan, in fact, made sure that he brings outsiders. So he brought people from California and the Midwest. This government has brought people from the South primarily, non-Washington experience at all, hoping that they'll make a difference there. Just goes on and on. If you look at the parallel, it's getting interesting more and more. Reagan's first few years were controversial. He could not get many things done. But there's a difference. Reagan was an actor. Now, what do actors do? Actors don't write their own script. There are professional script writers, and the role of the actor is to read those with emotions. So Reagan was master at that as a movie actor, had perfected the skill. Unfortunately, Donald Trump is a writer himself. And it seems like the English is not that good. And which is the key difference between the two. During Reagan time, there was only one external enemy, which was Soviet Union. Reagan immediately raised the defense budget, Star Wars we call it, the Strategic Defense Initiative. Trump has raised the defense budget, but now he has to fight three fronts which we don't think there is any way US can manage. The Russia front with the NATO, the Middle East, which we are absolutely in a quagmire, and then the Asia front. The China, slowing down the Chinese on that side. Which means the United States will need partners. And partners will come from places that we don't imagine. There's a huge shift economically that's taking place. I just wanted to give you the parallel and then tell you economically where the world is going and therefore Reagan and Trump policy and how it will impact. At one time, as of 1987, 75% of all the world GDP was concentrated in 15 nations. North America, US and Canada, 12 common market countries in Europe, which included England, France, Germany, etc., Netherlands, Italy, and Japan. Japan was a late entrant, by the way, became number 2 or number 3 economy in the process. 75% of value add was there. That's where the manufacturing took place. Trade was about 45% because colonies were still exporting raw materials, agricultural or industrial raw materials, sometimes even the manpower. You need land, labor, capital and all the stuff, which is interesting. That brought about a change in the whole international trade. Economies were not growing after the first energy crisis. Domestic growth was not there. So they abolished the GATT agreements, which were the general tariffs and trade, and it created the World Trade Organization, WTO. Trade gave the bump. All of a sudden, the new triad power is no longer those nations, but through economic growth, the new triad power is US still number 1 in purchasing power parity. China just surpassed that, and China will become number 1 in the nominal GDP probably by as early as 2020. Even though US economy is growing, but Chinese are coming at a much faster rate on a much larger base now than ever before. And the third nation in the new triad power is India. Purchasing power parity are clearly there. Ours is not 6.5 trillion purchasing power parity based, it's slightly more. Turns out to be almost 10 trillion, but because we have such cash economy, it is not properly recorded. So we are equalizing with that kind of a estimation approach. So everything will shift toward Asia. We have Japan as the third largest economy. South Korea is a big one, but you will see the rise of China and India. So the whole world is going to shift toward Asia. So Asia is the new pivot economically, and because of that militarily by definition, and therefore everybody is racing toward here. In this new triad power, you have US, China and India. These three nations, unlike the previous triad power, who were rationalized in their thinking and policy by world wars, defeating Japan and Germany, these three nations have different legacies. China has a communist legacy, therefore they think differently. We have pretty much an anti-capitalistic view as a population. We started a socialistic society of India, planned economy. We are transitioning from that to become capitalistic, and US is raw capitalism. Everything trust capitalism till it fails, then government comes in. So they're not on the same page. There'll be a lot of exchange and dialogue among the three. The question then is that in the triad power, if the two get together, there is a balance of power shift. India becomes very strategic both for China and for the United States. It's a foregone conclusion that US and China probably will not remain partners, economic, definitely not militarily, and maybe not politically. US now badly needs a major presence over here, more than Japan, and that's where India begins to become very strategic to the American interests, both militarily and definitely economically. So you see the new alignment taking place. Let me go back to Trump and his announcements and what are the consequences on the trade and economic policy. The first thing he announced was that there is no more Trans-Pacific Partnership. 11 nations, after working many years, the agreement was signed in Atlanta, the city that I live. I attended the last get-together of some key people involved, and all of a sudden, here is a new president who simply says that's absolutely not acceptable, so TPP is dead on arrival. Without US, it makes no sense. While other nations are trying, and there may be some other argument, but in the short run, that's not going to happen. Bilateral trade will replace multilateral trade agreements. The 5 nations who are really having a huge economic surplus, balance of payment surplus are, number 1, surprisingly, is China, of course. Number 2 is Mexico. Number 3 is Germany. Watch Germany. Number 4 is Canada or South Korea. South Korea is the 5th one. And they have targeted these nations who export lot more to America than import from America, have to do a couple of things. Either import more or invest in America. So multilateral trade will shift now back to bilateral trade worldwide. While the US starts the process, it's going to happen. With the Brexit in England, they are going to engage into bilateral trades probably. Or maybe the Commonwealth countries. US will become a significant economic partner to England as they divest from the European Union, for example. It's a matter of time before it's going to happen. So it will be more bilateral agreements. The trade is not what we teach. I find that 35%, and if you add the captive suppliers, about 50% of the world trade today is not between different companies, it is within the same company, what we call intra-company or intra-firm trade. That is going to have a massive impact. Same multinational exporting a part here, importing back again is counted as a buy and sell trade, import, export, etc. At Motorola, in semiconductor business, I was amazed, same semiconductor from the time it starts till it's ready for a customer, went around the world 3 or 4 times. Every time it goes out, it's an export. Every time it comes back, it's an import. It's a false international trade theory. That was true for General Motors, where it makes engines one place in Canada, exports it to America for assembly, or to Mexico. It is counted as an export from Canada, import into America or Mexico. Then when the product is assembled, where the labor is, it counted again. So it's very false economy. So the traditional trade theory has broken down, which is a very key one. And he's basically taking advantage of to say that this multilateral trade agreements or free trade agreements will be replaced. This is very fascinating. So we think the biggest impact will be within the companies, such as Apple. Apple basically imports quite a lot of products made in Taiwan or mainland China. So Foxconn, which is the supplier, is massively investing in India, in the United States, building capacity. I think you will see the same impact between US and India, which I'll talk about in a moment. So that's really one aspect. I do want to mention something else happened in the Reagan administration that is not in the public domain, and that was a huge debt by the government. American government had borrowed on treasury bonds, and the largest holder was Japan. Interest rates were skyrocketed under Carter administration. Prime rate was like 9 or 10%. The monetary policy has an impact now on fiscal budgets, you see. You have to pay interest on that debt. Size of the debt is much larger now. Today the debt is about $3 trillion easily. Largest holder is China. Second largest holder probably is Saudis or Indian or Japanese or whatever they are. Very interestingly, we will convert our public debt into private, just like we did with Japan. The Federal Reserve Central Bank talks to Bank of Japan, which is their central bank, who somehow behind the scenes organizes gives money to the Japanese Zaibatsu's banks like Mitsubishi Bank, Mitsui Bank, Sumitomo. Remember at one time they were the largest balance sheet holders asset-wise. With the mandate that you can borrow this money, you don't have to pay back, zero cost of capital, but money should be invested in America. If I get a free capital to invest, I will invest. I will buy a junk, it's okay. That's what the Japanese did. So there will be massive acquisition by Chinese corporations into the US. Germans have already understood. All the 5 major automakers are now assembling in America, from BMW to Porsche to Volkswagen, all of them, rather than exporting, right? So it basically reduces the export. So making into the country becomes very interesting. So that conversion of private debt into public debt into private equity is a very key one. So private equity guys made enormous money at that time. You see, again and back again, private equity guys will come in a very big way. The names will change from, like say, Goldman Sachs to Blackstone, for example, but it will be the same process again this time, which is quite interesting. So we can just talk about going back to pre-WTO era. Export-oriented economies will shift to foreign investment all over the world. What America has started will trigger now all over the world. It's not going to be limited there. It will happen in China, it will happen in Germany, it will happen in Japan. That means they all will have to liberalize foreign direct investment policies. In India, therefore, it's not what the FII, which is the stock market investment, which is very speculative. Today I put $1 billion and tomorrow or day after I can pull out in 5 days. I can buffet your stock market, make it more volatile, but if you have to invest in FDI, you are stuck here for a while. That's the new model that I think will happen around here. The direct investment will replace trade worldwide is our forecast. Japan is massively investing worldwide in the process, including in India. They're probably maybe the largest investor so far and will continue. Korea will follow very quickly. And China's global expansion in other emerging markets. We are targeting emerging markets in the ASEAN theater, Africa for example, but they will come to the US in a big way is our forecast. And similarly, India will benefit. India will benefit for a totally different reason. The world now finds that China is so dominant in manufacturing and exports. They want to de-risk because they don't understand whether China will go in this tension between US and China. You need a second sourcing destination. You cannot have supply chain totally at the mercy of the politics. You have to de-risk. And the nation that benefits in de-risking turns out to be India. The problem with India is that we don't have scale, we have size. We have no scale. If I want to buy $20 billion of jeans, nobody in India can supply. So our supply chain, because we have allowed too many companies to be independent. So I'm encouraging in India, government should actually encourage consolidation. We have too many banks. We have too many oil companies. We have too many anything. So how can you consolidate into, so you have a now not only size but scale. I mean, we are the largest producer and consumer of milk and milk-based products in the world. But we don't have any large dairies of the level that one would have on a global scale. So that's clearly is one of the key things that I'm watching. And the real assets of this country are public sector enterprises. They have a scale. If I can put 4 oil companies together, now I come out in the rank about the top 10 or top 5, top 6. If I can combine banks together, I become one of the large banks in the world. Our domestic standards now shift to the global standards. So India will benefit because of the Chinese de-risking from China. Chinese expansion into OBOR, as you might have heard, right? One Belt, One Road initiative, they've changed the name. While it's a massive infrastructure investment, probably about $1 trillion, that architecture that is put in place is not captive. Anybody can use those roads. HCL around here, Infosys. In Germany they hire Germans. In Japan they hire Japanese. In France they hire French. Only in English-speaking countries they think of sending Indians out there. So this visa policy with $4,500 cost of getting H1 visa or more, with dangling all the time annually, quota system, etc., says that the third leg will be very important. That means in the IT services, Indian companies may be one of the largest employers in America. Think about that. Just as in this country, if you go to Hyderabad, Ernst & Young, which is an American company, has like 50,000 people working. So will be Accenture. Not for American work, but the worldwide. It is very interesting. So I think this bilateral arrangement taking place will be very valuable. And now we put a consortium like Israel on the one hand, Japan on the other hand, all trying to create a consortium of something to counterbalance the rise of China. India just is having enormous benefit in the process. So my view around here is that I think India is in the right place. Goddess Lakshmi is blessing it. When Goddess Lakshmi comes, you don't say, I have some dirt on my face. Let me go to the washroom and clean it up before you bless me. You take the blessings when it happens. Interesting, right? That's where we are. We missed the boat twice. Right after independence in the 50s, allies wanted to outsource manufacturing. India was the perfect place. But because we had a non-alignment policy, we decided we can't trust the colonial powers. And we refused. Think about that one. Otherwise, we would be the manufacturing capital. They would have given us the technology, they would have given us the scale, everything for their interest, as they have done. If you look at the Chinese exports, more than 50% is all foreign brands making things in China. It's not Chinese brands, which are now starting to rise. We missed that boat. We missed another boat when Mrs. Gandhi was in power, because at that time we had to align to protect ourselves militarily. We also had a foreign exchange problem. Nationalization took place, but we aligned with the Soviet Union at that time, which set back the nation 25 years. It's the third time Goddess Lakshmi says, I want to bless you. And I hope this time we are ready to be blessed properly, right? Thank you very much. I do want to add one additional thing which is personal. I'm a refugee from Burma. My father went there in 1918 or something around the World War I. British Empire wanted to create two capitals, one for West Asia, which is from Calcutta, west. They put investment in Rangoon or Yangon to create another capital for East Asia. They needed lots of bureaucrats because, we knew the British system of legal, accounting, everything. And my father went as a merchant for rice trading. In fact, Burma was the largest producer of rice in the world at one time. Azim Premji's grandfather went there to buy a rice mill, for example. Lots of people from here freely went to Burma. Unfortunately, Japan attacked Burma, they were rolling out, and we became refugees. I come from a merchant community. I would have come back to India, and probably back in Kutch, where I come from, I would have a small shop, typical Pandora shop, probably 500 square foot. I was making 5,000-6,000 rupees. I would not be a high school graduate, but I would be happy. I don't know my own potential. It is my sisters who saw a potential in me, encouraged me to get education. Teachers encouraged me. This nation gave me free education. Think about that. And so it's very important to understand that we all are privileged class, all of you. And you must have a sense of giving back the day you graduate, which is why I do this presentation. If you take a grain of wheat and make it into a loaf of bread, the value add is only 3 times. Agricultural commodities to finished product is about 3 times. If you take a rough diamond and polish it, The diamond cutter will get a brilliance out of the diamond, and the value add of a rough diamond to a finished diamond is about 15 to 20 times. You might have some exceptions, but average is about that. But if you take a human being, mentor, train, invest, nurture, the value add is infinite. So while we are blessed with agriculture, we are blessed with animals, we are blessed with industrial raw materials, the real potential of this nation is its human capital. I believe very strongly, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And that's what we need to leverage as a nation. Okay? And I'll just add one more thing. It's absolutely incredible to see how it's such a small thing one can do to amplify that human capital. It's not a big thing to do. And this nation needs to learn how to invest in its human capital, which I think it's trying to do. I think the right leadership does that. But to me, that is the real asset. I must tell you that Indian diaspora is very strong worldwide, well placed. How do we leverage that Indian diaspora? They all want to contribute back. We need to come out a policy, a formula, how to do it properly. So to me, ultimately, this nation is on the rise. Despite all the things you hear inside the country, all the issues that we have, it is transforming in our eyes. And all nations are made not by themselves but outsiders. America was not made by natives, it's all immigrants. You will see same thing here, outsiders will make India more so than insiders will do. It's a matter of time. I've analyzed the whole thing, so it's very fascinating. So overall, I'm very positive about the nation. I think this nation is now clearly declared as one of the major powers emerging, economically at least, and maybe politically, and militarily also we are very strong. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that fascinating talk. I just wanted to recall 2 points of what he said. One, that although everybody is sort of exercised, surprised by what has been happening since President Trump got elected, but perhaps there are parallels. Things similar happened a little earlier, but things move in cycles, and it's not entirely new. And he also made a reference to countries now investing in the United States. And just wanted to recall that over the past 5 years, Indian companies have invested more than $15 billion in the US, generating 100,000 jobs directly. So there is a direct job creation happening. So I know Professor Sheth is pressed for time. I will use my moderator's privilege to ask one question and maybe take a couple of questions from the audience and try and wind up in 5 to 10 minutes. In terms of the one question that I had, I recall I first went to Japan in September 1985. At that time, it was 240 yen to the dollar. And because of the reason you mentioned, US put pressure on Japan to raise the value of the yen. And by the time I left 3 years later in 1988, it was 120 yen to the dollar. Of course, one interesting thing that happened was that at 240 yen to the dollar, Japan's trade surplus to the US was $10 billion. At 120 yen to the dollar, it became $100 billion because contrary to laws of economics, the demand for Japanese products then was inelastic. But it had inevitably its impact, and production shifted elsewhere to Southeast Asia, Korea, and after a while the Japanese economy began to stagnate. And that's the situation we've seen now for decades. So how do you see the US now dealing with China, keeping that context in mind? The challenge of China, the economic rise, the growing economic domination of China. How do you see that playing?
I think US will be a massive investor in China. When you look at Japan at that time, just before 85, largest corporations in Japan were actually American corporations. Pepsi and Coca-Cola dominated. There was not a single Japanese company which would come up with a leg in terms of soft drinks. IBM dominated. There was no Fujitsu at that time. I analyzed about 50 industries, and when I used to visit Japan, my Japanese counterpart would say, Professor, think about how much Japan is dominated by US corporations. If we dominate it like that, we'll have a revolt on the street in your country. So I think Chinese will figure out a way of creating bilateral investment, not trade. And both will massively invest into each other countries. That's my forecast. Already, in fact, IBM is very large in China. Accenture is gunning for China as they're gunning here. So on the economic side, there will be cooperation. The only place where US and China will not get together will be on the defense weapons side. US will not provide them, which is why Israel, US, background with America, the major weapons buyer. The defense side will be ex-Soviet Union. The country sitting on the sidelines that we need to watch very, very important is Russia. Russia will become a global player. My view is that there are only two nations who can bail out America from the Middle East. I mean, the mess that we have, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, wherever we have a mess, it's a no-win situation for Americans. How do you gracefully exit without creating a major issue in the nation? You have to have another superpower come in. Chinese will not come in. But the Russians will come in a big way. And Russians will fill that void in our quota. As US silently wants to exit out that one, it's like Vietnam all over the world. So we'll declare a victory, but we'll be creating our success. This administration is dead set in not investing anymore in that Middle East sector. And Russia has a self-interest because it's an oil-based economy, energy-based. The key energy players are in the Middle East for them. They know Saudi Arabia as well as they know Iran, for example. They have a good relationship with Syria. All the enemies among themselves are all friends of Russia. Unlike the Americans seem that you have to take a side. So that's another one, which means the focus of US will shift toward Asia. So my view is that I think both nations will come out quite strong. US will allow Chinese enterprises to pretty much take over the market. It's a very predictable model. What Japanese did was taken over by Koreans. In steel, we saw that in Japanese exited essentially. Steel became Korean, now it's Chinese. Japanese exited consumer electronics basically now. It's just not worth it. Koreans have taken over, like Samsung of the world, or LG, appliances, etc. Now Chinese will take over. Behind the scenes, you see General Electric, which is the second largest manufacturer of appliances, was sold to fire in China, not to Electrolux. Interesting, right? Government said no problem. So many of the large Chinese corporations, both in industrial raw materials as well as in industries where America is just non-competitive, they will say that's your market, you can take over. Out of nowhere, Lenovo will become number one PC maker in the world. It is already almost reaching there. Probably HP has no business being in PC business. Dell is not interested in PC. They're trying to articulate where PC business will be made to invest into EMC or something else. In fact, HP would rather be a services company than a manufacturer. Which is why Foxconn is investing, because they will be the contract manufacturer. So I clearly see Chinese corporations with the same excitement, surprisingly, as we talk about the Japanese corporations. Excellent products they make, very reliable. Remember, Chinese, Japanese had the same image. Made in Japan was a laughing stock in our school. We used to laugh about made in Taiwan, made in Korea. Today, we don't laugh at Samsung or Hyundai in the automobile business or LG in appliances. Same thing will happen. Chinese can make products today all quality, not just low end, but all quality. We somehow relate Chinese as low end, but they can make all quality products. And Chinese will probably outsource low-end manufacturing to other countries like Africa or Southeast Asia as a part of reciprocity of some sort. I personally think India will be invested both by the Chinese and by the Americans. We will be the common ground for both of them, partly because we really don't have large domestic corporations in many industries where it's a battleground from outside the cell phones. There's only one company that is really assembling anything here. So Xiaomi is going to battle out with Samsung, today's news. Both will be now triggering something from Apple. This will be the battleground, which means this country will have an enormous presence of foreign multinationals making most innovative products here rather than selling from their countries. They will invest in factories like Nokia. The same all over. So it's very fascinating. I think manufacturing in this country will be revitalized by non-Indian companies. Indian companies are stuck with their capital. And our capital is very high cost. You cannot simply say it's obsolete. You have to phase out over time. These guys will build brand new factories. And those will be like the next generation of whatever technology it is. We are becoming the R&D capital in the world, by the way. All tech centers, R&Ds are coming here. Pharmaceutical R&D is done here more and more. It's not low-end wages, but high-end wages. And ours is much more at a high-end engineering products, where I think we will survive or dominate, which is interesting. So we see Israelis in that coming year, a little more at the high-end. Low-end will be mostly Chinese, etc. So I overall see economic growth coming, but more to investment into each other rather than to trade. That's economic.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of food for thought there for corporate leaders, for faculty, for students. We'll take one question, given shortage of time, from the audience. Rahul?
Yes. Sir, what you're suggesting is for Indian companies to consolidate. The maximum number of employment comes from small and medium enterprise in India. So how do we reconcile this factor? So one you're suggesting is go on economies of scale, and then maximum number of people are employed in small and medium enterprise. What will happen to them?
Most of the small and medium enterprises have strong presence in local markets, regional markets. Often in FMCG sector, number one brand may be a national brand, number two is a local or a regional brand. So Santur dominates in Andhra Pradesh more than Lux, for example. That has been the architecture. It is the key strategy for small and medium enterprises. The biggest opportunity in India is that 65% of all product consumption is unbranded. 90% of all services are unbranded. Most of the procurement, consumptions and selling is unorganized sector. So what's going to change is the unorganized sector gets organized and unbranded people will become branded. Same company. So Haldiram now becomes a branded product, not just chilled out or something I buy. Street vendors, kind of. They will get hurt, definitely. But the mid-sized companies will benefit. Right? If you don't believe that, think about Patanjali. Who would have thought in 5 years there'll be like 5,000 crores or whatever ungodly number is, and they've just begun their journey. What took Unilever maybe 75 years. It's just organizing an unorganized Ayurvedic shops. That's the key thing. And they're becoming quite technology savvy. So my view is, here's my dream. There are 30,000 Kutchi merchants in Bombay. Kutchis came to Bombay to do trading. Each one has a shop. The value of real estate is very high. But the traditional way I can amplify by having today I can get an HD TV for under $100 actually. Every one of them has this most modern screen and they do transactions much more electronic, both display, advertising, etc. So you can have now this coexistence of the traditional family-owned businesses but becoming a lot more contemporary. fact, I'm doing something that I know is going to happen. So our biggest strength is that we have leapfrogged the technology by going in the path. And I think that evolution has helped quite a lot of people, including small and medium enterprises. So I don't see any decimation of those people. They are very sturdy. They have survived many, many years, multi-generational. I do see the following change, and I will stop here because of the time. You know, the next generation of young people, there's a huge discontinuity from one generation to the other. The generation gap in India is now only 8 years. The older sister cannot relate to the younger sister in not only lifestyle but in value. They are about 7, 8 years apart. They're moving that path. The young generation, the boy meets the girl or the girl meets the boy. They decide they will get married. Parents have less to say now. And once they decide to marry, they don't want to live with their parents unless it's absolutely necessary. So what happens is that they want to start their own household, which means they're first-time buyers of everything, appliances, to television, to not only cell phones. Fascinating. And they don't want to buy from the neighborhood provision store, so they have modernized themselves with digital technology. That's another big consumer market is the biggest opportunity in terms of unorganized becoming organized, unbranded becoming branded. So, and by the way, last statement is very interesting. If you take the IT software person in Bangalore, just as an example, he might be paid about, let's say, 1 lakh or slightly less than 60,000 rupees a month salary starting. He has no savings. His cost of living is very high. He's in some guest house, guest payment, I don't think. He's paying rent 10,000 or so. He has all modern habits. He wants to be at a nightclub. He has some significant other. He is dating, is what I'm saying. Contrast that with a crane operator in Mundra, Kutch. He also makes 65,000 rupees a month. High school graduate, married, has a wife, lives with the parents, has no cost of rent. His discretionary income is far greater than the IT software. So the real potential of discretionary spending is in rural India. They can buy a motorcycle faster than the urban guys can buy a motorcycle. He has to borrow money on the future income, etc. So we are watching the rural India becoming the buying power, not more because of the discretionary income that they are generating, especially those who are vocational certificates. I know we have more questions. I would love to go on, but there is a deadline here to stop here. I hope you have enjoyed. Thank you very much.
So on behalf of IIM, I thank our distinguished guest, Professor Seth, for making this function truly memorable. So as a part of our tradition, we would like to present you with a small memento. May I request all guests to please rise for national anthem.
Bharat Bhagya Vidhana Jai